Hi there, Group 4. Today I will be reading over Chapter 1 of the Johnston book. The chapter is An Unavoidable, Reasonable Assumption. A little bit of an overview to the chapter. It begins with Zoe's stories. I included some key vocabulary words that will come into play throughout the book. And then the main part of it is a discussion between free and determined will. And then there's some issues that could be influencing those, and then the consequences for practitioners. So beginning with Zoe's story. Zoe is a certified BCBA that she visits an agency that has like day programs, and one of the attendees is Robert, who during certain activities does not enjoy to participate and instead chooses to disrupt the other members of the day program and the staff. So the meeting that is gathered on the day that Zoe is there is to talk about what they're going to do in regards to Robert. One of the staff members, the psychologist, says that Robert, he is free to choose whether he wants to participate in the activities, and he doesn't have to if he's not interested. To which Zoe agrees, but wonders what is the reason for his lack of interest, and Liz states that there is no reason. Zoe counters that with there must be something to it that gives an idea as to what may be influencing him. And Liz, possibly feeling threatened, continues to state that there's no reason. At which point Zoe kind of settles back and tries to switch to discussing what consequences could be for Robert's behavior. So some key vocabulary terms that you'll need to know is free will, which is the assumption that all choices are made free of any outside influences, whereas determinism is the opposite, which is the belief that our choices are all determined by previously existing causes, such as outside influences or hereditary factors. And then we've got parsimony, which is an unwillingness to spend time and resources on something. A mental event, which is a way of referring to a particular non-behavioral incident or like a mental activity. Behavioral consequence contingencies are dependent relation between a response and an environmental consequence, which often revolves in results in a reinforcer. So now we go to the main discussion, which is free or determined. The first section, inside versus outside, it goes back to the beginning where it's stated that Liz and Sharon both believe that Robert is free to make his own choice, whereas Zoe disagrees with it. But that implies an inside versus outside distinction, which could cause an individual's behavior. Although there may be outside influences, this view states that what goes on in an individual's mind is what controls what others see. So the choice that they make is what they then do. Based on how individuals are taught, tend to make a decision like between two things. So in the beginning, one of the members mentions that it's her choice if she wants to decide to eat a salad or a baked potato. That's their choice that lends to whether they want to eat it or not. So are we free to choose? Free will implies that it's completely within our ability to control our own power, such as willpower, which makes it seem that we're able to refuse or decide to do something based on an internal decision, and that decision is uniquely our own decision, such as whether you're going to eat or not eat dessert, knowing that it could potentially lead to your waistline. There are many phrases used in everyday language there are many phrases used in everyday language that suggest individuals act in a certain way, such as I don't know, or when others ask what were you thinking and you're not quite sure how to answer, then you believe that there is no reason behind the action. Most will agree that there are many instances throughout the day where outside forces are in control, such as when you're driving, you avoid a curb or you turn left because that's the direction that you need to go. But to tell them that there is no such thing as free will often results in arguments and leads them to take offense. Or is our behavior determined? Agreeing with determinism does not require knowing exactly what outside variables are at work in each moment. Often they could be hereditary, they could go back to how we were taught as children, or how we are shaped to think as we grow. Assuming that behavior is predetermined, that is essentially absolute. There will be no exceptions to it. Free will, it puts us in control of our behavior, where with determinism, it is believed that free will is an illusion. The assumption that physical events are explained by other events has long been respected. It's been a respected position within natural sciences, and behavioral science falls within a science. So it is believed that can be determinism is the only option, only belief. Some competing assumptions. It's impossible to gather evidence providing that behavior can be free of physical or other causes or variables. In order to provide free will, there would also need to be proof that behavior can occur without hereditary environmental influences. So there's a side to both issue, but it comes down most to what would be beneficial in understanding the behavior, how that would shape your life. Most importantly, to remember that no instance of behavior is considered free of physical causation. With the assumption of determinism, one must avoid unnecessarily complicated explanations such as outside forces that lead to questioning more than just, is it a physical object? Could it have been something that is non-physical that causes it? So some issues with both is, as I mentioned, non-physical causation. If events have no physical dimensions, then they won't have the same kinds of causations as physical events. There's also responsibility. This is that when assuming that a behavior is controlled by an outside force, does that mean that one is not responsible for their decisions? In a scientific sense, no, because the individual is not a controlling authority who makes their own decisions about their behavioral, and those are independent of physical variables. But however, you make a decision and you must live with those consequences of your decision. This kind of leads into behavioral consequence contingencies, such as if a parent is going to ground you if you miss curfew, that is an influential decision on whether you're going to stay out for the rest of the night or not. By accepting that by accepting that a behavior is predetermined, it doesn't mean that we can abandon responsibility. We assign the responsibility for behavioral to sources of control in the physical environment. Next, we have choice, which is another outcome of assuming behavior is fully determined by physical variables. That conflicts with everything that we're taught growing up about making our choices. But that also leads to such choices as when you turn 18 and you can finally vote. Are you looking into your own research and doing your own research about how you vote, or are how your parents voted leading you to vote a particular way? Free will is much a part of our culture, and it can be difficult to abandon the idea of free will, which is why so many people struggle to understand the concept of determinism. So some consequences. As a professional, to believe in free will, it limits the ability to resolve behavioral problem. As seen in the beginning, as an ABA, it complicates efforts to have to convince others to focus on outside factors that may be causing the behavior. Especially as the psychologist, having to convince the psychologist that there could be more than just the one theory behind why he was acting out. Could it also be that maybe he just doesn't like the room they're in, or maybe he doesn't enjoy the games that they're playing? What other activity could be done to fix this issue? A deterministic assumption accommodates a focus on choosing as long as it's seen as behavior like any other. So the question I'm posing is that in the beginning, Zoe attempts to seek out what other factors it could be that is bothering Robert, but was unsuccessful. So as a professional, how might you approach the situation differently to gain a better understanding of what it could be outside his decision? So how would you approach this to avoid the interaction that Zoe had in the beginning? Thank you so much for listening. Good one.